Number 1. Jogging. I grew up in the 70s and in the 80s, and I wanted badly to be an Olympic athlete when I grew up. It's important to know that I am female, to understand the horror that is behind this story. I was fortunate that my school had the means to train me and the equipment that I needed to use in order to work out. During the school year, I would be able to work out and get a good workout with no trouble at all. The summertime was a different story, however. My family lived way out of town. The school didn't even have bus service to take us to school during that time. My mom would always drive me to school before she went off to work, and she would pick me up afterward. I didn't have this option during the summertime, however. I mean, my mom still worked during the summer, but the school wasn't open, so I couldn't take advantage of their equipment. So during the summer, I would always take a nice jog out in the country. The roads were dirt roads, not gravel, so they were pretty easy to jog on. The only problems were that we had some pretty hot summers even back then, so I had to be careful not to overheat myself when I was out exercising. So I would very often exercise in the late evening when it was getting dark outside. Although it wasn't well lighted outside, I knew the way, and often the moon would give more than enough light to see the way. When I was 17 years old, I'd been doing these jogs for several summers at that point. I'll be honest that, at that point, my likelihood of ever being an Olympic athlete was pretty small. Yet I kept staying in shape no matter what. So I did these jogs nearly every day that I could. There weren't a lot of houses along the route that I jogged and back. However, of the few, there was one that I had always assumed was abandoned. We never saw any people. We never saw anyone at the house. Hell, even some of the windows were boarded up, and there were no trespassing signs all over the place. I'll admit the signs didn't mean much, though, since they were everywhere out in that area. The house just looked abandoned, too. It looked like it hadn't been kept up very well, and it was probably just a local hangout for ghosts. So I was jogging in the summer in the evening. It was still light enough outside to see things clearly, even though the sun was setting. When I ran by that house, which I normally didn't pay much attention to, something caught my eye, and I looked over at it. There was a man out on the porch, in a chair. It looked like he was smoking. I was surprised to see him, wondering why anyone would likely to have moved into a house like that. Normally when I jog by a house and I see someone on the porch, I would wave to them as I passed by. Either that or they would wave to me first. But I was so surprised to see someone at the house that I didn't even think to give a friendly wave. I just jogged on, suddenly lost in my thoughts about what was going on. The next few days that I was out jogging, I didn't see the man sitting on the porch again. However, not seeing him there made the jogs a lot less comfortable for some reason. I mean, I don't know why, but I began getting a really uneasy feeling every time that I passed the house, both on my jog out and my jog in. I told myself that the feeling was only because of the fact that I had seen someone at the supposedly abandoned and very creepy house. But regardless of the reasoning, though, I felt uneasy every time that I jogged by that house. It might have been about a week or so after that, when I was doing my nightly jog, that I noticed something else. I finally saw the person sitting on the porch again. Although this time when he also saw me, he got up, and then he walked into the house. I still failed to do a friendly wave because I was still surprised to have seen him again. I got to the point in my jog when I turned around to go back toward home. It was dark at that point, and although the moon was full, it was still a little scary. And I don't know why, but I began getting that uneasy feeling the closer that I had been getting back to that house. I mean, we all get feelings like that from time to time, and you can't shake it no matter what. So you know how I must feel as I jogged on by. I was listening to my Walkman, as I do every time I went for a jog. That was one thing you could say about a lot of 80s music, was that it was good to exercise to. It kept me going, and thankfully, the music helped me relax a little as I ran toward the house. I ran up to it, feeling nervous, but I passed it without anything happening, and then I felt a whole lot better. I had a little ways to go before I got home, but I did feel like I was able to relax a little bit more. As I was running, the strangest thing happened. It felt like something touched me from behind, as if someone were jogging right behind me. However, it was a light touch, but it still surprised me. Only slowing down slightly, I looked over my left shoulder. I was horrified to see the guy from the house running behind me. There was enough light for me to know that it was him without a shadow of a doubt, and he was chasing me. It was then that I realized that the man must have been trying to grab me, but perhaps I was fast enough that I was able to escape his grasp. That was all I could think of, but for the split second that I saw the look on his face, the crazed, insane, and in my viewpoint, evil look, that I was truly scared for the first time. I did the only thing that I could do, and take off as quickly as I could. I was just jogging previously, but now I put everything in a high gear and I did my best to run fast. The first few times I checked back over my shoulder, I saw the guy in pursuit of me. However, it was obvious that he wasn't in the same condition that I was, and was falling behind me. But there was no doubt that he was still trying. I ran as fast as I could, and stopped looking back after the first few times. I just wanted to get home, knowing that my dad was home, and would absolutely protect me from this creep. So I ran, and when I got to my driveway, I ran up it and to the door. The moment I stopped to open the door, I expected to be grabbed and pulled away from the door, but that didn't happen. I got inside of the door and closed it shut and locked it. There were 3 rectangular windows on the door, and I looked through them, trying to see if anyone was out there. The man was there, but he was standing on the end of the driveway. He didn't approach the house. My mom and dad were concerned with how I ran into the house like I did. I turned and looked to them and explained to them what happened. I then turned and looked out the window, and the guy wasn't there anymore. But I knew it was the guy from the house, and I made sure that my father knew that too. My dad took his gun, and he went out there after the guy. My dad was a huge old country boy who anyone in their right minds would have been scared of. He went out after the guy, jumping in his truck and going toward the house. My mom didn't call the police because she was worried that my dad might get into trouble. We simply waited for him to get back. It took a while for my father to get back, and it was a bit nerve-wracking waiting for it, but he arrived back. We both hoped he would have gotten a hold of the guy, but that didn't happen. He didn't find anyone alongside the road, nor was there anyone at the house. He even busted the door down into the house so he could check if the guy was hiding in there. He didn't find the guy anywhere. We did some checking and it turned out that the house didn't have a tenant. The property was owned by the owner of the town's grocery store. No one was supposed to be in that house. They figured some homeless guy took up residence there for a while, or perhaps it was an ex-con who had nowhere else to go. I don't know. Whoever it was, I'm just lucky I was in shape and could outrun him. Number 2. Spotlighting. I grew up in a very rural area. My family was pretty poor, and we didn't normally have much to do to entertain ourselves. But we did have guns, and so did my best friend Tom at the time. So occasionally as teenagers, we'd go out spotlighting. For those who don't know what that is, it's when you go hunting at night. You take a light with you and you shine it into the woods. You'll get to see the light shine off the eyes of an animal. Then you would be able to try and shoot the animal if you could. It was an extremely dangerous method of hunting, and illegal in most places. It was way too easy to accidentally shoot someone else who happened to be out in the woods. My family relied strongly on hunting in order to eat. Although at the time, I was just a kid, and I did it because I enjoyed doing it. As an adult, I really don't care to hunt like I once did. But anything that I might have shot, I would definitely have brought back home with me. Tom and I had gotten pretty deep into the woods, and had no luck finding anything. We never had too much luck hunting anyway, because we weren't very good at being quiet when we went out. Plus, I always wondered, if you were shining the lights all over the place, if you didn't scare off all the animals beforehand, so you couldn't get anything. Honestly though, we were just bored, and out for something to do. We didn't really know if we were gonna actually get anything, you know. After a while, the light disappeared, and Tom grabbed me from behind. I jumped, and then was about to admonish him because I had the gun, and he had the flashlight. I was about to tell him that he definitely didn't want to be shot. He immediately told me to be quiet, though. Tom got close to me and said, "There's a huge guy out there," in a whisper. I only saw him from behind, so I turned out the light, so he might not know we're out here. I was confused to why he seemed so cautious. I had the rifle on me, and I wasn't really scared of someone who was out in the woods. We literally had a gun, something everyone in a horror movie seemed to always lack. We could sort of see each other in the dark, as my eyes were adjusting to the light being off, and I really wanted him to turn the light back on, but he seemed too scared to actually do it. So I finally grabbed the flashlight from him. I turned it on and shined it over in the direction that he indicated that he had seen the man. I began walking over toward that area, rifle in one hand, the flashlight in the other. Tom was scared, but he followed me because he didn't want to be alone. But no matter where I looked, I didn't see anyone out there in the woods with us. I kept shining the flashlight all around, which made him nervous because he thought I would have drawn attention to us. I finally decided he was probably just trying to scare me. I told him that he had his fun, and we should probably start headed back toward my house. We didn't get very far until we both saw a person. However, this person was laying on the ground in front of a tree, and as we got closer, we realized that this person wasn't breathing, and their back was covered in blood. That was when the fear suddenly hit me. I didn't even think about checking for a pulse or anything. I just wanted to get out of the forest. So Tom and I started heading out of the forest and back toward my house. It took us a while to get there, but we still called the police when we got home. The police found the body, and it was definitely dead. He had been stabbed several times in the back. They questioned both of us, but I told them that Tom had been the only one to see a guy going through the woods. I had no way to describe the person to them. Our experience made living in that area really scary. It also created a lot of buzz around Tom and I, which wasn't too comfortable. I mean, if the murderer had read the newspaper, he would know we were out there that night. That made simply going to sleep a scary thing, and we stayed out of the woods for a while after that. No one was ever charged with the crime. I'm sure that because neither Tom or I were ever contacted about having to identify anyone. Not that I could have anyway, but as far as I'm aware, there is a murder that is left unsolved to this day. Number 3. Platform. I have never gone hunting in my lifetime, and I don't ever plan on it. I have nothing against people who do, I just know that it is not for me. That being said, if I don't know the terminology that hunters use for things, then I apologize. When I was about 13 years old, my parents bought a really large rural property. Other than the area that we had our house on, it included acres of woods that surrounded the house. It didn't take long until after we moved in that I began exploring this area. I would end up spending a whole lot of time out there too, letting my imagination run wild. Since there weren't any houses anywhere close to me, I would always be doing this out by myself. There were no other kids for miles around. Within the first couple months of us living in the house, I found something that truly interested me. There was a platform up in a tree. It had a trap door in it and a retractable rope ladder that hung down from it. I found it pretty fascinating. I was able to get the ladder down and climbed up through the trap door onto the platform. I found that I could see quite a bit around the woods from up there, and I liked it. When I told my dad about it, he told me that it was something used by hunters. They would hang out on the platform for hours and hours, waiting for deer or something else to shoot. He explained to me why a deer hunter needed to be hanging out on a tree, but I have to admit that I don't remember much about that. The fact was, the platform was sturdy, so I had a place in the woods that I could camp out on every now and then. I figured it would be better than sleeping on the ground. When I was 15, I had spent plenty of time over the previous 2 years hanging out on that platform. I would go and sometimes even camp out on it in the middle of summer, and throughout the whole time, I never had anything strange happen. So that is what makes what eventually did happen all the scarier. It was a late summer day, and I decided to spend the night out on the platform. I got myself a flashlight, my comic books, sleeping bag, some food and drink, and some other things to go out for the night. I let my parents know where I was going, and that I would be back home in the morning. I was in a pretty good mood that day, as I recall, and I was looking forward to what I thought would be a really good night. Well, I will fast forward past all the normal stuff about going out and setting up. I'll get straight into what happened that night. It was dark, and I had been on the platform for quite a while. I had 2 sources of light, a regular flashlight and a book light. This was years and years before mobile phones were such a common thing, so I didn't have anything like that. However, having only the barest amount of light really didn't bother me. I wasn't afraid of the dark. There weren't any wildlife that I needed to be afraid of up in that tree and in that area that I was in, so none of that was a big deal for me. It had been dark for quite a while when I had heard it for the first time. It sounded like footfalls. At first, I just perked up a little, my first thought being that there might be a deer or something else nearby. I had experienced them in the area several times when I was out in the woods. I listened for a while. I had been reading a book at the time, so I switched my book light off. As I listened, I kept hearing the footfalls around the area. I wanted to flash my light out there to get a good look at whatever it was, but I also didn't want to scare a deer, if indeed that's what it was. I just kept on listening to the sounds of the footfalls, wondering how many deer might be out there at the moment. For a while, I just heard them walking around. There was no pattern or anything to it as far as I could tell. I was enjoying listening to it too, until I heard something that was unexpected. It sounded like someone falling onto the ground, which was covered in dead leaves and saying, "Shit." It was only then when I realized that what I was hearing was a person walking around and not deer. My immediate thought was panic. This was private property, which my father owned, and no one was supposed to be on it. I worried that anyone who was out there might be out there and up to no good. My first thought was to shine my flashlight out to see who was out there, but I decided that was a very bad idea. Whoever was out there was definitely trespassing on my dad's property, so they were already breaking one law. Who's to say they weren't completely willing to break another law too? I heard some talking, but I couldn't make out what was being said at first. I listened, trying to be as quiet as possible, but the more I tried to listen, the more that I couldn't make sense out of what was being discussed. Although I had heard the word shit quite clearly, the rest of what I heard sounded like they were speaking in gibberish. And I don't mean like another common language, more like nonsense you hear when someone is supposedly speaking in tongues. I had heard people do this before, and it really reminded me a lot of that. I tried not to make a sound. I was really worried at that point. I wanted to get down off of that platform and run for home, but that wouldn't have been the best idea. I would have to open the trapdoor and lower the ladder to do it, although I was in a prime position if I was a hunter. I was in a pretty bad position if I were to end up the hunted. I wouldn't have time to get down the tree before they noticed me. The strange noises got closer, and they got louder as they got closer. And still, I couldn't understand a word they were speaking. It was more of that weird-sounding gibberish. Soon, they were standing right under the platform, by the trunk of the tree that I was hiding in. I could hear them talking, so to speak, right under me. I had never in my life tried to be more silent than I had at that point. I was scared that in my trying to be quiet, that I was going to end up making a noise that would give me away. I was as conscious of the sound of my breathing as I was of the strange language being spoken by them. It seemed like they were under my tree forever. I kept waiting for them to figure out the platform was in the tree and find a way to get up on it. It was the freakiest moments of my entire life. Finally, I heard them begin to walk away from my tree. I wanted to breathe a sigh of relief, but I really didn't want to make a noise. I also wanted to get out of that tree and go home, but I didn't do that either. I did the only thing I could, just remain up on the platform, trying to be as quiet as possible. Despite the nervousness and the fear, I eventually did fall asleep. I woke up in the morning with a shock, mad at myself for falling asleep. I immediately got down from the tree and made my way home in the safety of the sunlight. Although that wasn't the last time that I went out to the platform, it was the last time I ever spent the night out on it. I think my parents thought that I was making the story up. I had once told them I had seen a ghost, and they thought I was making that up too, so they didn't seem to believe me. But whatever those things were out that night, whatever weird people or weird something else, I definitely heard them, and I'm glad I haven't ever again. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. Hope you enjoyed this Country Wednesday video. Hopefully I can be on track, and I don't know how many of you are surprised that I actually stuck to the schedule so far this week. I gave a video on Monday and now a video on Wednesday, and let's see what we can do for this coming Friday. On my last video, some people seemed a little upset with the first story that was done from the perspective of the bad guy. I hope that I didn't offend anybody by reading the story. A few people thought that it had something to do with me, but I guarantee you that it did not. The story was a submission that I received and narrated. If it offended anybody, though, I do apologize. Right now I'm getting used to my new microphone, which the sensitivity on it seems a little hard to get used to, but I hope it sounds alright and that you guys have been enjoying the new videos. In the meantime, if you like the video, please let me know by hitting the like button. Give me a comment if you want. I'm always happy to hear comments, and I try to get back to you all whenever I can. If you have a story you'd like narrated on the channel, the address to send that to is included in the description. And until next time, please don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a killer orange cat might be hiding. Good night.